Welcome to The Explainer. We're going to talk about a pretty wild idea today. What if you could make money that wasn't backed by gold, but by something, a bit more modern, like microchips? Yeah, you heard that right. We're diving into something called the Silicon Standard, a proposal coming out of Taiwan that could totally shake up the global tech economy. Okay, so how on earth do you turn a microchip into actual money? I know it sounds kind of crazy, right? But here's the secret. It's not really about the physical chip. Nope, it's about the incredibly valuable, high-trust economy that's built around making these things. An economy that, believe it or not, runs on promises. Promises worth billions and billions of dollars. So, to really get this, we've got to start with a super common business problem. Picture this. You're a supplier in Taiwan. You've just shipped $1 million worth of components to a giant like, say, NVIDIA. Awesome, right? Well, you've got an invoice, a legal promise they'll pay you. The catch? They're going to pay you in 90 days. But you've got your own bills, your own people to pay, and you need that cash now.
Yeah, that gap, that 90-day waiting period, it's a massive problem in the tech world. It means there are literally billions of dollars just sitting there, locked up in what are basically fancy IOUs. And that is the exact problem the Silicon Standard is trying to fix. How do you unlock all that value, like right now?
All right, so here's the big idea. You've probably heard of stablecoins, right? They're a kind of digital currency that's usually backed by good old-fashioned cash sitting in a bank. But the Silicon Standard, it flips that script. It proposes a new stablecoin, they're calling it T-chip, and it's backed by something you could argue is even more reliable, those big fat invoices from super trustworthy companies. We're talking Apple, NVIDIA, TSMC, the heavy hitters.
Okay, so how does this whole thing actually work in the real world? Well, the really clever part is that this model isn't trying to invent some crazy new currency out of thin air. Not at all. Instead, it packages the whole idea as something that regulators and businesses already know and understand really well.
And you have to look at it from the regulator's point of view, because this is key. See, a normal stablecoin can look like it's trying to compete with the country's own money, and that, understandably, makes central banks a little jumpy. But the TY chip, it's framed as digital commercial paper. It's not saying I'm money. It's saying I'm a digital IOU, like a short-term business loan. And that is a way easier conversation to have with the people in charge. So the process itself is actually pretty slick. First, our supplier takes that NVIDIA invoice and locks it into a smart contract, which is just a fancy term for code that runs itself on a blockchain. Then, an automated service, they call it an oracle in the crypto world, jumps in and verifies the invoice is legit by checking the company's data. Once it gets the green light, bam! The contract instantly mints brand new TV chips, say for 80% of the invoice's value. And just like that, the supplier has digital cash they can use right away. But, making these TW chips is only half the battle. The other super important part is getting your money out. How do you turn these digital tokens back into regular old US dollars? For a system like this to actually work, it needs a solid, reliable off-ramp.
Right. So let's say a vendor just got paid in TW chips. That's cool and all, but their shipping company only takes US dollars. What do? Well, the system's actually designed with a pretty clever, multi-layered solution for exactly this problem.
So you basically have three options to cash out. For all the small, day-to-day payments, there's a 24/7 automated currency exchange running on the blockchain. For the really big B2B payments, you can just go ahead and redeem the original invoice. And if you need to work with other digital currencies, it uses something called an atomic swap. Think of it like a secure digital handshake for direct trades. It's really meant to be a full-service financial engine.
And this brings us to what might be the system's killer feature. They call it natural unwinding. Just think back. What was the original asset? It was an invoice that was going to be paid in US dollars by NVIDIA. So when NVIDIA finally pays that bill 90 days later, the exact amount of US dollars needed to cover the T-chips just flows into the system. It's beautiful. It means there's almost zero currency risk because the whole thing was denominated in dollars from the very start.
Okay, so we've got the nuts and bolts down. Now let's zoom way out, because the vision here is, well, it's huge. This isn't just about making supply chain payments a little faster. No way. This is about completely rethinking what we consider valuable in the age of AI.
And this is where things get really wild, really futuristic. What if the TW chip wasn't tied to the dollar at all? What if, instead, it was pegged to the single most valuable resource of our time? I'm talking about AI compute power. Just imagine, one TW chip equals 1 minute of raw processing time on a top-of-the-line NVIDIA H100 GPU.
In a world like that, the TW chip stops being just a way to pay bills. It becomes a strategic asset, a must-have. AI companies all over the world wouldn't just spend them, they'd start hoarding them, as a way to lock in their future computing costs. It would basically become a direct claim on the oil of the 21st century, the raw power that fuels the entire AI economy. It's digital gold for the AI era.
And that, right there, is the end game. The ultimate goal. It's about taking Taiwan's absolute dominance in making the hardware and turning it into pure financial power. It's about creating a whole new kind of financial center for the world, one where the value of money is tied directly to the real, tangible things its incredible tech industry produces.
It's an amazing vision, right? But let's get real for a second. Like any idea this big and this disruptive, the road from a cool concept to actual reality is, well, it's going to be a bumpy one. There are some huge challenges ahead.
And these are some seriously tough questions. I mean, first, valuation. How do you put a price on a warehouse full of chips when their value is changing literally every single day? Then you have the legal side. If a company doesn't pay up, can a smart contract, a piece of software, really enforce a claim on physical stuff in a warehouse? That's a huge question. And what about liquidation risk? What happens if the semiconductor market takes a nosedive and all the assets backing these tokens suddenly lose half their value? And finally, who's actually going to use this? Will it ever break out of being just a tool for big businesses to pay each other? These aren't small problems. They're incredibly complex. So, all of this leaves us with one last, really big thought to chew on. Is Taiwan's destiny not just to build the world's hardware, but to build its financial plumbing too? This whole silicon standard idea is basically a blueprint for a future where industrial might can be turned directly into financial might, a future where the very definition of money isn't set by governments and banks, but by the people who are actually building the future.